Welcome, everyone, to episode 343 of Dial the Gate, the Stargate Oral History Project. My name is David Reed. I appreciate you being with me for this episode. We are live with Peter DeLuise, writer, producer, and director for the Stargate TV series. As this is a live show, you are invited to join us in the YouTube chat and submit questions for Peter, if you have them, and then my mods will get them over to me. Peter, I have been so grateful to have you on a few different times now. You are one of the reasons, sir, that I keep the show going after 300 some odd episodes, because when I looked back on your body of work and the content and all of everything that you've done, I wrote you earlier this week and I was like, is it possible that I've only really covered 11 shows with him in the episodes that we've done? And it's true. So I don't feel like I've really done my job very well. So I must apologize for that, for not getting that far.
Don't blame yourself, David. I'm sure I blame myself, actually. Every time you ask me a question, I probably go on and on and on and don't shut up.
I don't think that's it at all. I think I've been focused on window of opportunity a little too much. It's like, let's talk about window of opportunity again. Come on.
Well, that was a good one. That was fun, that one.
It was a lot of fun. I just finished, this was not on the list, poking around at an episode called The Tomb. I love that episode. I think
that's the one in the Ziggurat with the Russians, right?
Ziggurat. Yeah. The Russians are coming. I think it was Ivana Vasek specifically who designed that set. I believe it was Ivana. The production team took the Gould sets, the standing Gould mothership set, and built inside of it that brick corridor and made an absolutely stunning award-winning set. It was an extraordinary episode, and it was claustrophobic. And I think Ivana, if I'm not mistaken, was the one who said that people spoke quieter in there when it was all closed in. Like there was something that went off inside of them that said, okay.
It was, there was no light, technically there was no light source. Peter West wanted to light it mostly with flashlights when he could. I remember him with a pie tin behind the actors trying to make extra flashlight. So it would kick into their, and then off camera, everyone had a pie tin on their chest. So if your weapon's light hit the other person, it would bounce back into your face. Yeah. And then, much later, Jim Menard came up with a clever way to deal with the gunlight situation, because if you have this overpowering light right here, and the face behind that, it was like, why would there be light here if the light starts here and goes that way? He made this kind of exhaust port on the backside of the flashlight. He cut a slit that looks like an exhaust port that you would see on a target shooting pistol, and it would kick back light from the flashlight into your eyes. That's what he was so sick of asking actors, can you please shine the light on this character? And of course the actor would say, well, then I'm pointing my gun at them, so why would I point my gun at their faces? So he's like, forget it, I'll just cut a hole in the flashlight.
Yeah, there's little tricks that I didn't. Okay, so they weren't wearing pie.
No, off camera.
It was off camera, being pointed at them and then back.
Yeah,
like the dental lights that were shot at the Enterprise in motion picture to light up the Enterprise in dry dock.
Imagine Peter West off camera holding a pie tin and shining a flashlight in it to try to get something on their face, because he had committed to lighting the scenes with flashlights, right? Yeah. And then much later, Jim was like, well, we're not doing that. I'm just going to cut a slot in the flashlight. So I interrupted you. That's why we only covered 11 episodes. I won't shut up.
No, that was that kind of thing. I remember motion picture. They got Star Trek. They got a tray of dental appliances, and they sat them all up, and they shot a light at the dental appliances and then took them and adjusted them so that when it hit the ILM model inside of the dry dock, they could make up extra light sources. And in universe, with the consoles for the second season, they took little light rigs, light bars that rotated so that when you were shooting over at the actor's face who was on the control board, They could
Yeah.
turn these things around and it would shine light on them. You just made things work, how you ever had to.
And we had these weird, I think when I first came on the show, right away, I was not impressed with a lot of the what I'm going to call the uninteresting flat background. And I said, "Well, aren't we underground here? Like, where are the pipes and stuff?" I said, "This needs some love. We need more texture here, right?" And I said that. I guess I've said that a few times. And then somebody came up with a bunch of pipes being held by racks, and then they would put it and say, "Well, this needs something. Let's put the pipes there." And then,
Plantons.
plant-on pipes. There was also the conduit in the ceiling. There was the conduit tray in the ceiling for stuff to look cool, and it started to look more and more like a submarine as it went. And then eventually, both Peter West and Jim Menard decided it made sense for them to have what you're calling plantons, a box with a light source. So there was a battery-rated box, so there would be bits of lights and high points in the frame or currently, not unlike what you have behind you, but
Right.
they were less obvious, a little bit more subtle.
BLUs, which stood for blinky light units. It actually
Blinky
said
light
BLUs in these
Yeah.
electric
Yes.
or powered cases.
Named by the same person who the GDO, the garage door opener. Yeah.
That's it.
So Ivana does deserve a lot of credit for that. I had not remembered that she designed that, but it was a beautiful set, and I think it was quiet for a couple of reasons. There was sand on the bottom, and there was a naturally sound absorbent material. I think we were surrounded by styrofoam painted to look like rock.
Yes.
And then it was dark. So it was a giant, wonderful maze, and that's how we were able to do that running shot when the doors were closing, and it was like, we got to get out of here, and we just kept running around in a circle and going this way, and I told the Russians to say a whole bunch of stuff that was
Naughty.
a little bit silly, yes, and naughty, yes.
Absolutely. No, that set was absolute magic, and there was so much going on in that episode in terms of it was Douglas MacLean's set. Doug MacLean.
Okay.
So I'm pulling up his website right. I did not want to move on without giving proper credit. Ivana has done some amazing work on the show, but in this particular situation, and my screen recorder is still not working, so give me just a second here while I make this work. There. This is Douglas MacLean's work from his website, rainbowbeau.net. And it's just exemplary of the stuff that you guys were able to pull off
amazing.
On a
Canopy
television
jars.
budget.
I remember canopy jars in the main room was in the middle, and it had where did they have the bodies?
In the tomb?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember where they found the Russians. I don't remember where the Russians were, but I do remember this main hall here with Marduk's sarcophagus tied up.
That's what sarcophagus. I couldn't remember the name. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that room. That was a big. That was. Yeah. That. Also, there was. If you kicked the sand around enough, there would be particulate in the air, and you'd be like,
But it looked great.
Yes.
But it was crap on the
cool.
day, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, you got to take it. You got to take one for the team.
That's
between
it.
Between the mineral oil smoke and the particulate in the air.
For sure.
You got it. It just looks cool though.
The creature in that episode, the concept art for it had the strangest face. It had like two mouths, like a weird pair of like eyes. It had tentacles and it had spider legs. And we only see it for a blink on camera, really.
Yeah.
Did you guys make it in pieces, do you recall? Or did you actually manage to make the full thing? It was one of the oddest looking things, and I wish we had gotten more action.
I thought you were gonna tell me, David. Was it not a CG thing? Are you saying it was a practical thing?
I think that part of it was because they have to cut into the back of its neck and look inside of it. So at least the head was definitely real, Or
So they made like a little gut bag that
they
they had to cut
had to
open.
have. I'm going to pull up
Oh,
the concept art for it because it's just one of
I
those things that,
I remember the concept art where it was all twisted and gnarly. It looked like somebody's like you'd open up the yeah,
look at
there it is.
that.
Yeah.
Whose mind thinks that up other than Ken Rebel?
I wonder if he was sober at the time.
Right? Exactly. Who thinks of that thing? But you guys made it work. And, you
The
just can't get bored with the
image
artistry.
the image on the right, I recall that more than I do the one on the left. I remember
Yeah.
seeing the one on the left going, oh, that would be a cool chopper motorcycle thing. Some tank art on a chopper. Yeah.
Absolutely wild, man. I want to talk about duplicating actors. So there are a couple of episodes that really stand out to me
Yeah.
in this context with you as director, and they both really heavily featured Amanda Tapping. Point of
Mhm.
View was the first one, and Gemini was the second. These were five
So
years apart. And in point,
did I direct Gemini or just the point of view?
did you direct Gemini?
It doesn't matter.
Did you
I
write
love
Gemini?
talking.
Directed by Will Waring, but did you write
Yeah,
Gemini? What was your involvement in Gemini? There was something there.
I don't know,
Peter
but
DeLuise wrote we were part in this episode.
okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
so a twin replicator. So yeah,
I can tell you, I love talking about twinning. Twinning is very challenging, and in point of view, the quantum mirror episode, we had, I think all of that took place on the base. Is that right?
points of view definitely took place
Yeah.
on the base in
So the
multiple realities.
Yeah. So the thing with twinning, most people in the old days, and when I mean the really old days, if you wanted to duplicate something, you would black out this side of the lens, and then you'd have an actor right here, and he would act and pretend to be looking at himself over here, him or herself over here, and then you rewind the film backwards, and then you'd black out this side, which meant that this side had not been exposed to the light yet, and you'd black out the other side, and you'd have the actor on this side looking where they were before, and then it would expose that side of the film, and then when it came out together, it would look like you'd had the same person on both sides.
So you actually
And
put it in the same piece of film.
I'm talking about, the Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin era. Like
Oh, not you. Okay,
no, because they
way
weren't
back.
using, yeah, way,
So you
way
didn't.
back.
You only
Okay.
exposed one half of the film each time. They did.
That's how twinning started, right?
Okay.
When they didn't have options like we have. Now, what
Okay.
we would do is we would lock off the frame, which meant that we were going to just photograph one spot, right? So my hands are I'm trying as best I can to, because this isn't a mirror for me. So the camera would be locked in this frame, and we would be filming only this spot, and we would have the actor here, so we wouldn't have to black it out because because we have nonlinear editing systems. We could take this half of the frame and then splice it down the middle, and then put it together with this half of the frame. And if the actor was on both sides, after the splice, but then you had to be careful where you were splicing. That you had no, there could be nothing moving through the middle. So
And no
a tree
lighting problems, no shadows.
branch. Where's the tree? Let's say this is a tree branch. If a tree branch was behind my head and it was going through the cut,
Yeah.
the tree branch would move and it would give the effect away, right? Because it wouldn't line up, right? So there had to be a natural way to cut it down the middle. So that was the next generation of twinning. And the generation after that was you could just as easily put a person in front of green. That would be the foreground element. So it's still a lock off, but here's the foreground element, and there could be stuff going across the middle of the frame where the cut was eventually going to be, because everything behind this was going to be the background plate. And in the background plate, also a lock-off, was the other version of the actor, right? So you've got a foreground and midground, but they seem to be looking right at each other, right? Okay. Here's the problem with twinning. Then it got even more sophisticated.
Right.
Everyone would say, well, that looks like a twinning shot because it's just stuck there.
It's static, you mean?
Static.
There's no motion control, anything.
Exactly. So the next interesting level of intrigue was you would punch in to the frame after getting the actors on both sides, and then you would just there was an old thing called panning and scanning, when they would take a feature film that was this big and they would make a square out of it, right? And sometimes there would be a two shot and that the square could not contain, and they would pan and scan across from one actor to the other. Well,
But the full shot had actually been filmed, and after the fact, they were doing it?
that's right.
Okay.
Right. So now what we could do is we could punch into a much bigger frame and then just create a little fake movement. There was no parallax, right? So if you saw a tree in the background, it wouldn't,
Yeah.
trees wouldn't go like that. But it was subtle enough that you go, oh, there's some movement to the shot. I wonder how they did that, because most twinning shots are just stuck in the same spot.
You're almost faking a handheld thing.
Exactly.
Wow.
Now the next level after that, you could. Will Waring did use this trick very successfully because he was a cinematographer or a camera operator rather. He was very familiar with a piece of equipment called a repeating head, and a repeating head was the part of the camera which was between the dolly and the camera in itself. So it had gears on it, and it would record the movement. So if the camera went like this or up a little bit or like that, it would do it exactly the same in the same timing, one after the other. And so if you had one character, let's say you had one character go behind another character,
Yeah.
you could pan the camera over with that actor, and the way and as long as the one in the foreground was on green, you were good, because the one who passed behind the other one the one in the front needed to be cut out from the one that
Right.
was passing behind
As an isolated plate.
Exactly. So Will Waring used a repeating head, which was awesome.
And that was for Gemini.
That was for Will Waring's episode.
Yep.
Yeah, but he brought that, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting piece of equipment. There was another piece of equipment that had not only had a repeating head, but it also could move the dolly back and forth. And that's what we used on. I don't remember the name of the device, but if you said it to me, I would remember. But it was a weird sounding name, but it was specifically for the repeating of a camera movement in exactly the same time. So what would happen was, the challenge always was, how do you get the actors to synchronize their performance in the exact same way that they had done it, and also have the camera move at the appropriate time, right? Because you couldn't see, after you'd laid down the track, you couldn't see the other actor. You couldn't see the first version of the actor because they weren't there, because the frame had to be clean so that the other actor, so that the second pass of the second twin had to pretend to be looking at the other actor.
Exactly.
And you give them an eye line. So that system came with an audio recording that would record the performance that the actor could hear
and react to.
Yeah. So what I remember, we created a system where I would count down really loudly so the actor could hear it on the second pass. I would say, and 3, 2, 1, action, really loud. And so not for the benefit of the first person.
Yeah.
It was because my voice was being recording on the track, so that the actor on the second go would now go, oh, we're acting. The scene has started, and they would look in the place where their previous performance had been, and they could hear their previous performance and act in real time. The trick, of course, was now they had to get their entire response in the tiny window that had been left for them. Do you know what I'm saying?
But you had the freedom of being able to do that pass again and again on the second one, right? Because you had picked and were happy
Yes.
with the first one, and
Yes.
that one was going to stick. So they had to
And
make it work in the
we had to
second
commit.
time.
We committed to the first performance, and once we
Yeah.
got that one, now we were working on the second performance. And the actor, in the case of Amanda Tapping, who's very technically savvy, she would have to listen to her first response, respond in the exact amount of time that had been provided for her, because the first version of it wasn't going to wait for her. The first version of it was going to respond in the amount of time that we had allowed, right?
Right.
Yeah, and that performance that she was bouncing off was often done by an off-camera actor, because they couldn't be on camera because they would contaminate the frame. So if I was acting with somebody that was supposed to be here, they were really just here, and I was looking at them there. Yeah, and so the off-camera actor would give the performance, and Amanda had the ability to adjust the speed of which I wouldn't respond that quickly, or I would do this, or I would do that.
Because she knows she's going to be going back in and giving the other half of this.
Exactly. So now you've got, she gives the first response, and somebody has to drop the sound out so that we can now record. This is of the pre-recorded thing that was on the machine, right? That everyone could hear. Someone had to drop the sound out of the off-camera actor responding, so that there was a space for Amanda's real voice to come in, right?
It's just nuts.
Exactly. And then back and forth and back and forth. So the trick of it was synchronizing that, and then knowing that at a certain point, if the actor was passing behind them, they went, and then they went like this, and then the camera was now doing that, right? Had adjusted over to allow for the second actor, or for the second pass rather. Now we did that again with Stargate Universe.
That's correct. With Twin Destinies.
Yeah, and we used that process, and I think
it was Nicholas Rush's character, or the actor was
that's right.
Robert Carlyle.
Of course. So Robert Carlyle, he was not a fan of that. I can tell you, he was like this because it was onerous, right?
Sure. Yeah. It's technical.
Well, it was because we wanted movement, right?
Yeah.
So I said, Robert, there's a much easier way to do it that is less onerous. And I said, if you want, we can just do a much wider frame, and you can do whatever you want to do on this side, and then do whatever you want to do on this side.
Just remember.
We had less ability to play with the performances, and so we would just only do a couplet, right? So we'd do one line out, and we'd cut to somebody else, and then one line, and then what we could do is on this side of the frame, if it didn't line up properly, we could speed it up, right, a little bit, so that the answer was right on the tail of the other performance. Wow. And then we would use the old trick, which was we would now punch in and pan and scan and create false movement inside, right? Now nowadays, I think they even did this when Rick was fighting himself with Bill.
The face
Bill
substitution
Nikolai.
with Bill Nikolai?
They would swap out the face. But that was very limited, right? I mean, he was holding his neck, and there was a really clear spot where the head could go, and you weren't looking at where the neck was meeting up. So they had a lot of latitude on that, and I think that was designed that way on purpose. Nowadays, you can swap out somebody's face like that, right? They did that on this is a great example. Fast and the Furious, they completely replaced somebody's face.
Are you talking about the homage at the end to the actor who had passed? Is that the one that you're talking about?
Yes, he died.
Who had passed away,
and his brother had to complete it, and they put his face.
Who almost looks exactly like him anyway. It was pretty extraordinary. That
there were wonderful examples of people who did twinning. Moon is a great example of. There's limitations in the past where you couldn't touch you couldn't touch. I mean, if you're doing a face swap, you can. But you couldn't hand something to somebody, or you couldn't touch their chest In Moon, they got away with it by doing this. They had the one actor stand like this in front of a green screen, and they had a second person reach out like that
Yep.
and touch the second performer. So the arm that was emanating from behind the silhouette of the first pass was not his arm. It was a totally other person's arm who was now grabbing.
Sam Rockwell.
Sam Rockwell was not touching his own chest in the second performance.
Wow.
That was part of the background plate.
And you were just superimposing him on the other one. But so as long as he generally followed the same movement or was static while the other person was static and just moving their arm, you sold the illusion.
Well, do you see how you can't see how my arm really connects to my shoulder
Yeah.
here?
Yeah. Not from this perspective.
Yeah. So, well, that was the point. Was Sam Rockwell did this performance, looked at his shirt and said, "You're a mess. Clean yourself up."
Yeah.
Then he got on the other side, and a second performer's arm reached out and fixed his collar like that.
It's just madness.
Right. It is madness, but it was a great trick. We used a similar trick with Amanda when she was holding her own hand in bed. That wasn't her hand. It was somebody else's hand up through the bottom of the frame, right? Wow. You know, and also Multiplicity with Michael Keaton was amazing.
Not seen it. Okay.
They went through an enormous amount of trouble where he would be on this side of the frame, and his
Counterpart.
The person who was a scene partner would be filming him from here, and he would look at them, and then he'd play out to where whoever else was in the scene, and he'd say some stuff to them, and then when he went on this side, they would take a video monitor, and put the video of his own performance on that monitor, so he could actually see what he had done and answer in real time. Because they had time to do that. They had, and at one point they did it. They did 4 Michael Keatons in one frame.
Oh my God!
Multiplicity, and they were limited by the lack of the technical skills, but they had a great strategy to overcome it. And nowadays, you don't even need that. You could just mocap somebody, right? You could have a complete other person, fiddle with them, and then just put the skin over top of them, right? Or you could just tell AI to do it.
Well, that's the thing now. I imagine, it may perhaps not with Gemini and with Twin Destinies and Point of View. You would also have clean plates with no actors in it, just as reference material.
You would always do that.
Yeah.
Every time you needed something to disappear or be translucent, or we would always, even if we didn't think we needed it, we would get a clean plate.
Just in case.
So a clean plate for your listeners is just simply somebody going like that. So now that background, I've got the entirety of this background, and if we were missing it or we never saw it, we could now replace it. But with AI, the AI could assume that this line continues on, and that this shade of gray probably exists behind my head, right?
Or for the fact that, if there's an actor crossing in front of the other, if the AI has information of the clean plate, it could probably have them seamlessly transition without an editor having to do it at this stage.
I'm continuously just completely blown away. So there was this other thing that we would always say was we didn't want to rotoscope anything if we didn't have to.
Frame by frame.
Yeah. So rotoscoping involved if the shape of my silhouette was in front of me again, and there's no way for you to separate me unless you have me on green. And the whole purpose of having me on green, or having a live organic thing, imagine this is green screen, you're telling a computer, ignore the green, and everything inside of the green has been cut out for you automatically because it's a silhouette against green. If you don't have that green, the problem is now you've got to go frame by frame and have somebody who's working probably in a third world country for very little money, having to go, frame by frame, which is 24 times in a second, having to cut me out manually against my background. And that was rotoscoping, and it was very expensive and very time consuming. So we always wanted to avoid that. But now, with the way the things are, and the kinds of stuff I see from behind the scenes, I don't think they care anymore. They just go, this is not a problem. Our computers can handle this.
That's the thing. Bruce Woloshyn and I had a conversation in 2004 because I was talking to him about, I imagine it's just I had made the assumption that, anything that you see that you guys do, people are aware of. And he's like, not some of the hardest stuff. And I'm quoting him, some of the hardest stuff we ever do is rig removal, where there are cables in shots and we have to digitally erase them. That's hard. And if you do it right, no one will ever know you touched it. But that's the same type of deal, going frame by frame and taking things out.
Oh, you'd be shocked at the kind of stuff that they used to pay money for. What's the Autobots franchise?
Transformers.
So Transformers. I was down at the hotel, and I was talking to these guys, and I said, "You work on Stargate?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, we worked on Transformers." And I said, "Oh, you guys, you do visual effects?" "Yeah, we do visual effects. We're one of the vendors for Transformers." And I said, "So, did you do the robots, the explosions?" And he goes, "No, we removed the blemishes from Shia LaBeouf's face and Megan Fox's face."
Yeah.
They have that? Yeah, they have that. So if you had a whitehead that day, we'd say, "Don't worry about it. We'll fix it." Well,
we'll clean it up in post.
We'll clean it up in post.
Clean up.
So imagine you worked on Transformers, but they're saying, "You worked on Transformers?" "Yes. We took the blemishes off of the performance face, and it was like they were just flawless the entire time."
Jeez. It's madness. I always wondered how, there's so much noise on the screen. How do you get it in there clean it? It's like, David, the noise was generally incorporated after the fact to make everything seamless. Because you had shots that were Super 16, especially in Stargate, and then you had these gorgeous HD film quality shots. John Gadetsky was talking about you have to make it all look the same. So there's a certain level of noise that's dialed in to go from shot to shot to make it so the audience member doesn't get pulled out.
That's so weird that you say yes. Why is there suddenly a picture quality difference? Right. When Wide was first came onto the show, if we knew that the next shot, not this shot, but the very next shot was the one that we were going to shoot a visual effects shot, we had to say, "Get the 35 millimeter ready," because we were shooting on Super 16 to save money. But all the visual effects shots were shot on 35 millimeter because that was a bigger frame, and they needed more information to shoot.
Need a bigger canvas.
Yeah. So John Lennox and those guys, they all had to figure out. They had hard and soft costs for two different kinds of cameras, right? And you also had to anticipate the next shot's going to be 35. So then one of your camera techs had to go, take the camera body, put the lenses on it, put the batteries on it, and then make it ready to shoot. And then you'd shoot with the 35 millimeter. And then are we done with the visual effects? Yeah. Okay, now we're back to Super 16.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the millions you guys saved just being frugal like that and making sure that you had the equipment there so that when you were doing like shots with pieces of the actors needed in a shot, you did that in 35 and then you returned to Super 16 for everything else. Well, and people are like, why haven't we done a Stargate in HD? Why is it just, up-res? It's like, because there's a lot of complicated stuff in it, and the genuine up-res process would cost tens of millions of dollars for one series.
Yeah. So in addition to that, of course you're right, but in addition to that, we were all when we were shooting the show, most people at the time, we were in transition.
Yeah.
People were watching the show on 4x3. So you're currently looking at me. Is this going out in 16:9?
Sure is.
So you see there's a rectangle from here to here. This is a rectangle. This is 16 units across for every 9. The ratio is for every 9 down, right?
Yeah.
So But prior to that, it was 4x3. So it was 4 across and 3 up, which is much closer to being just square. In the old days, we had square. So if anybody wanted to make their show available to what they knew was going to be the next generation of television viewing, this is called future proofing. If you want to sell your show in syndication, you had to provide a version of the show that would, in fact, translate to 16:9. So we had two frame references. This one, the 16:9, and the 4x3. Now imagine you had an actor right here. You're shooting the close-up of me, and you had an actor right here where my hand is. So the 4x3 frame ends there, there, and this actor starts to wander or lean this way, or this actor leans that way, and that character now only has one eye, like this, one eye in the frame. But it's a hero character. Maybe it's Richard Dean Anderson.
You need to see him.
You cannot present the show with only one eye. So what would happen was if the guy who's not being seen in 4x3 by anybody, if he moved over, then the operator was obligated to move the frame over like this to make sure both eyes of the other character was in. Now, what did that look like? That looked like, so if I'm shooting a close-up in 4x3 and I'm this close, suddenly the camera goes like this. Well, why did it do that? Because you still can't see the secondary character with one eye out there. So we were constantly having to compromise between the 4x3 and the 16:9 until we just said, okay, now we're only just shooting for 16:9. We're not protecting it anymore.
In that period before the transition was made, were the camera operators given 4x3 stencils so that they had that as context?
So the ground glass, those are the reference lines on the.
Yes.
We had a box, a 4x3 box, and a 16:9 box. We had both.
So you're a safe zone. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, and we had to protect for both, knowing that we were going to put it out in both, which compromised both versions of both things, right? So that it made it like, why have we done that? And you couldn't just put one character all the way over here and one character, like you couldn't do a north by northwest frame, if you're familiar with Hitchcock, of the two wonderful moments where they all the way down that wonderful old rural country road with the two characters on the very far side of the frame. It wouldn't look like anything in 4x3. It just looked like a big empty space, which is why you would have to now pan and scan. So before everyone had a 16:9 frame, the film would scan. It would start here and show one of the characters and then scan across the negative to the other character and show, but you'd never see it in its entirety because they couldn't show you the whole thing. And so why did they do that? And it was because they were trying to show you what the original frame looked like.
And I would think as creatives, we've got 16:9, it's great, but you can't use all of the real estate all of the time for certain key shots because you have to keep in mind largely the syndication audience. I don't know if Showtime originally broadcast it at 4x3 for season one and the early ones or not, but it's not there yet,
No, we were being told that when we were still protecting for 4x3 a couple of seasons. I remember Michael Greenberg was saying, "Why are we still protecting for 4x3?"
Right.
And the answer was because some countries still broadcast in 4x3, and a predominant amount of people have 4x3 television sets.
Star Trek only switched over in 2001 with Enterprise season 1, and all of a sudden these black bars were on the bottom and top of my screen, and it's like, what is? Oh, they finally transitioned. Yeah. So because people started accepting the fact that they were HD TVs.
They didn't want to see black bars. They thought they were being cheated.
My mom hates it. My mom, why are those there? Well, Mom, no, I don't want to know. Okay, fine.
So in each territory in every country, you could sell it to that territory.
Yeah.
So if you didn't make arrangements for that, then you were making less money, or everyone's mom was saying, "Why are there black bars on my screen?"
Exactly right. Just make it full size. What's more complicated than that? And I'm so glad we're past the period of where it's the HD screen with the 4x3 screen with the HD screen in it, and we don't have that go through that feature on our TVs anymore where we blow it up to make it all go away and then everything's fuzzy. Thank God for Blu-ray.
Yeah, and of course the when they do that, the frame looks very suspicious. Like, why is that frame like that? That seems such an odd choice.
I want to talk about one of my favorite episodes. Go from something that's extremely visually complicated to something that's wildly visually static for most of the episode.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this.
A certain pair of men hanging out in a certain glider floating through space on a trajectory past Jupiter to the Oort cloud. Tangent is one of my favorite episodes where if I have an hour and I need to kill some time, I don't know why, Peter, but I throw this one on. And I think it's because Rick is on his A game, and if he loves spending time with Teal'c because Teal'c just like puts up with him and gets it. And at the same time, it's just a really clever, great story. You used rear screen projection for this one, for Jupiter, for instance. What a week that must have been. And I've heard I ask for episodes like this, I ask for give me some meaty stories about this production, and everyone goes to the fart jokes. It's like, well, we were in confined spaces. Like, yes, I get the fart jokes,
And Chris was operating on a high protein diet, so
God,
he was a known culprit. Yes.
Tell me about what you remember from working on Tangent.
So
the X301.
The X301. I have a picture of it here. I'm going to show it to you. So we had the flyover. Do you remember the flyover with the
general and the blowing out the glass?
Vitrine.
Do you know who that is? That's the actor's name I can't think of right now. But
Stephen Williams. Do you know why I know his name?
I don't.
Because I recommended him for the role of that part because he played my captain on 21 Jump Street.
If you're still in touch with him, tell him I want him on. I've been trying to get in touch with him. He's so cool.
He is so cool. And I knew that he was so cool, and I was like, we need a cool general, man.
Yeah.
And then I have another picture I want to show you. So this is an example of where we would have shot Chris in front of a green screen. We would have blocked this off.
Yeah.
Put those. We would have shot a clean plate with Chris Judge in front of a green screen because his silhouette is overlapping with an object that isn't there. It's that's the 303 behind him.
301. Yep.
Sorry, 301.
Get it right, Peter.
Sorry, dude. And it was X at this point because it was still experimental, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Now, notice how in the clever way in which they have composited this, there's no way to tell how this is touching the ground. There's no wheels. Is it hovering? What the hell?
Yep, that's exactly right. It looks like how it parked in the movies when they would park up on the dunes and the Jaffa or whatever they were came down. Very cool. Yeah. So that's just him in front of another plate?
So that is him. Yeah. So we would have shot this plate with thinking, okay, where's the X301 going to be?
Yeah.
And then we would have shot. We probably shot him. Then we shot the background extras. You see that this one fella here, over here, he's overlapping the wing. So we probably got him on green screen as well.
Wow.
Or if he wasn't moving very much, we could have rotoed him. But he's out of focus, and out of focus lines are blurred, and that's not ideal for cutting out, right?
And just make sure that the sun is in the right place, and
exactly. And we would, and you see all the shadows going across like that. So what you asked me? Here's a reference to the cockpit. So those stars. This is not the best way to do this.
I can pull up the photography of the episode.
Okay,
go ahead. You go ahead and talk.
We had the cockpit itself, not the wings, but the cockpit itself, and that was on a Lazy Susan, and the cockpit itself was on a Lazy Susan, which we could rotate very slowly, and we had a star field behind the spaceship.
I care.
And so, yeah, I think that is an image of us removing the glass because we found out that shooting the angle of the glass was giving us too much kickback, and it was making it impossible for us to see through the glass to their faces, and there was a bunch of stuff in the ceiling that we didn't want to see. So
Okay.
the decision was made to take the glass away, which was very expensive because then they had to imply that there was CG glass in front of them, which they had to insinuate afterward. I think that was an expensive thing that we had.
You can see that there's no glass there, you know?
Well, I think they felt like the audience would like, we trust that there's some glass.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the far side, the front glass and the far side glass was there, but not the foreground glass. I believe that had been taken away because of the reflections that we didn't want to see.
Yeah. It's just all the components that come together to just sell a specific illusion from shot to shot.
I think the decision was made because Peter West was used to shooting the gate control room without glass.
Yep.
Yeah, he preferred to have it without glass, and Jim Menard preferred it with glass, and he would deliberately put in reflections, which eventually culminated in rear projection of the puddle in the glass that he would put in the frame as well, which was onerous because you had to get it just right.
Well, and that if you look really closely, folks, in the control room scenes, the glass is on a hinge for each of them, so you can. If you're paying attention, you can tell very clearly that when the hinge is offset to not get the reflection of either the gate or the crew, and
you would see the shadows of the frame in just those pieces of glass in the control room. Yeah.
But here we've got Jupiter in the. But go ahead and finish your thought, Peter.
So this spaceship, and do you have one of the Starfield?
Let me go through there.
There it is. Okay. So imagine that our camera is attached. Well, not attached, but the assignment was rotate with the thing. So as we rotated the ship, the background stars, which were you see how I'm moving the background of my thing. The background of the stars very subtly would seem to be going by, right?
Right, because the stars aren't actually moving because we're just in the solar system, but the ship is ballistic, and so it's kind of doing this as it's not flying straight.
Yes, so theoretically the ship is moving, and based on what was established in Star Trek very early on is that you see the stars go by.
Yeah,
right?
that's
so
it.
But that you would not see the stars go by. They would appear to be very static. But we wanted to insinuate movement. And that was
absolutely.
By slowly rotating the ship against a still star field. And getting them in and out of the thing was, we had to get ladders and they had to climb out and climb back in. And
so they were high up.
They were. Yeah, you know how it says no step on the wing? I think a lot of it was styrofoam, so they really couldn't step on the. And of course, there's tons of switches and stuff in front of him that look cool. In the insert, you see those, but that's not the part that gets the most screen time. Those blinky lights behind his head get screen time, right? You see, go back to that picture for a second.
Yeah, hang on.
This is the most neglected part of any spaceship, is right behind the actor's head. You see those wonderful blinky lights? That texture is vital to us not being bored because I'm gonna move my thing to make a point. This doesn't look like a spaceship very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you just have to trust me right outside that it's a spaceship. And so in close-ups, we tried to do 3/4 close-ups so you could see a sliver out the window as much as possible. And it was a marathon for those actors in the cockpit. But of course, they could have access to their lines,
Their scripts,
and
they can
water
tape it down.
and
That's right.
protein bars. Yeah, as much as they wanted. Yeah,
That's
they were in there for a long haul, and of course, all the fart jokes you can muster, especially with Chris Judge being there. Oh, and no joy on the burn.
No
Do you
joy on
remember
the burn.
No joy on the
We
burn?
have, yeah, it didn't, it
So
went the wrong way. So it was so nice to have.
who's that wonderful writer who wrote Red Shirts? He was a tech writer for our show for a while.
John Scalzi? Yep.
So I believe
It's John
Scalzi
Scalzi.
was used. So some of his technical advising was used, and Brad had an abundant amount of material from Scalzi on this. And I remember that after all was said and done, one of the only things that Scalzi had contributed was whittled down to no joy on the burn. And Joe and Paul just crucified. He said, why did you? He goes, well, I had to use no joy on the burn because, that's what they would say.
Scalzi
He
was
said,
contributing in season 4 of SG1.
I believe he was. I believe
Wow.
there was a discussion
Wow. Because I know he
about
participated in SGU for sure. He was given creative consultant credit.
I I think there was that's my recollection.
Wow.
I think but Scalzi didn't write that episode. Somebody else got the written by
Exactly.
credit, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And Brad Wright rewrote, and Robert Cooper rewrote an enormous amount of the scripts that were originally penned by outside writers because they often they didn't understand or they weren't privy to the arc that was going to happen in that season or the things that needed to be set up
Or character
or
tone, like when
a lot of
characters
the
talk.
mythology. Yeah,
Yeah, that everything. It's like Roddenberry always touched everything that everyone went through the office, went through his office in the original series, and all the writers were
sure.
so upset about that. But at a certain, I, you're getting
Well,
credit, aren't you? I mean, it's his
well,
show.
yes. How do I feel about
But
that?
I'm sure there's a line. There's
Roddenberry
a
wasn't. I think Roddenberry was way ahead of his time
yeah.
and was a genius. But he also wrote lyrics to the opening theme song so that
That's
he could get
true.
paid, and nobody
50%.
ever heard. You never ever heard those
Yeah, that was a dick
lyrics.
move. That's true. Yeah. But I mean, also like the number of folks, just to bring up John Scalzi, just for a blip, the number or that thread, the number of folks who went,
I have great admiration for Scalzi, by
he's
the
really
way.
amazing. The number of people whose hands, touched Stargate over the course of Neil Blomkamp, I mean,
Sounds dirty when you say it.
I know he touched Stargate in the wrong places. No, but as a visual effects
Blomkamp
composer,
sounds like a strange thing to do.
but I mean, the
No.
director of District 9, I mean, he
Oh,
contributed
is
visual
that who that is?
effects
Oh,
for,
District 9.
yeah, I think he was with Image Engine, if I'm not
That
mistaken.
dude is untouchable. He was
Man,
amazing. Yeah.
so good. Craig Vandenbigler, we had him on, and the amount of stuff
What's
that
with
he
all the
did with all
names? Are
the.
you trying to trick me?
No, I just had them on. So the
Okay.
replicators,
Oh, okay.
were his project, and going from Nemesis in season 3 to Arc of Truth, where I mean, he could put in collision and let the bugs just take off and make their own path. It was just the advancements over just a handful of years was
Yeah.
just extraordinary, and it keeps on going.
Well,
Absolutely
he's
amazing.
District 9, and then what was the one with the robot that he did after that?
Chappie.
The Chappie. God, that was so great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was better. It didn't deserve the ratings that it got. It was much better than
So
that.
is he South African?
I
He
think
must
so.
be, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's got to
Alive
be.
in Joburg was what District 9 came from. And I saw District 9's first trailers, and I'm like, this is a total ripoff. Someone is going to get sued. And it was the same guy. And it's like, okay, all right. He's just going bigger, like with Lights Out.
Yeah.
It was a short,
Yeah.
and then it became something else. If you have not seen on Disney Plus Light and Magic, you need to go watch it, Peter. It is one
Okay.
of the single best documentary miniseries that I've seen in a long time. And
Light
it
and
talks
Magic.
about designing the Dijkstraflex, which was the original motion capture device that they created for Star Wars, designing the technology to make these passes happen, and all through Empire and Jedi and into the modern era. It's It's like about 9 or 10 episodes total, and I was amazed at what I learned. The Snowwalker sequence in Empire Strikes Back is the single greatest sequence, in my opinion, in all of cinema, where everything comes together. And it's, if you are a fan of visual effects, anyone who's listening, go and watch Light and Magic. You will not be disappointed, because the guy who wrote Jedi, I can't think of his name right now, but he was the one who actually directed the series, and it's terrific. One of the other ones, are we good on time for a little while?
Yeah.
One of the other ones that I definitely want to get to is another favorite of mine, because of the intricacies of what you had to do practically on set and the cleverness of the idea, was the Serpent's Venom. This is one that is so far out there in so many ways. Let's scuttle a diplomatic meeting between two Goa'ulds by letting one think that the other one is firing on them, and all we have to do is go to an alien minefield, ring it aboard, reprogram that mine, release it again, while also not letting it hit the interior of the bulkheads of the cargo ship while we're at it, and play around with codes and everything else. The banter between the characters is just great. Carmen is fantastic in this episode. Rick is on point with, you know, thinking that he's all amazing and sitting down in the chair and putting the HUD on. He's like, oh, this is not so easy after all. And Christopher on his own with Obi and another actor who we lost in the last few years. I'll pull up his name in a second here. This episode was terrific, Peter. It is one of my favorites, and it is one of the ones that you penned. What do you remember about Serpent's Venom?
I remember trying to get really dark with the torture sequence.
Yeah.
And I mean, I named the torture guy Terok.
Terok.
Because there was like terror was in his name. Everyone who's a Jaffa has to name it kind of at the end. And I remember Martin talking about how this actor, I think
Paul Kozlo.
Kozlo.
You got it. You got it.
He was doing well, I looked it up. I hadn't remembered.
Still got it, Peter.
I did remember that it came to light that he was giving his performance in a way that Martin was concerned that the flange, the gold flange, was going to sound strange, and so he did a check-in to see can we do this, because he's doing a lot of stuff with his voice and he's not just speaking clearly. There were certain limitations when you flange somebody, which was you take the original track, and then you would take a second track of the same information and you'd slide it a frame or two this way. And then so it had, and then you put a lot of bass or something on the wall.
Yeah, there's two elements. It's a bass, it's a change, and then there's a wah wah, which is actually, if you listen to it,
oh, okay,
it's changing pitch as it goes along.
Well, clearly you know more about it than I do.
I've created the effects on my end before. It's really cool.
So, because he was doing that, I think Martin was concerned that it was going to lack clarity, and so he brought it to our attention. I also remember thinking that I think Galaxy Quest had come out a short time before that, and so we were heavily influenced by a minefield in space, which was
that's right.
So that was part of the thing, and then this is also the torture stick. And I think this is an example of Chris being tortured. Now, when you got zapped by this thing, well, you would hear the director, that would be either me or Martin, saying, "You have to keep your eyes open, because we have to have the light coming out of your mouth and your eyes. And if your eyes are closed, you can't have the light coming out of your closed eyes." And I think I've caught it here. This is an example of having light out of somebody's closed eyes. Yeah.
Look, there's only so much that these things can do. So, yes.
I mean, it's just... Oh, you've got one too. Mm-hmm. That'll spice up your marriage. Let me tell you.
Absolutely.
So imagine you're an actor being tasked with experiencing pain, excruciating pain, and you go, ah.
Right.
And the actor goes, no, you have to keep your eyes open. So, ah. I like that. Yeah. Yes. That's what you have to do. Yeah. So that was one of the things that was thing. And also, I remember Brad suggesting that Chris Judge had his arms, his gigantic gun show elevated because he was going to have the chains, and because he was he had such a magnificent physique, you wanted to see the arms up. And I remember Brad holding his own arms up, and he's got to have his arms up like this. I said, okay, sounds good, Brad. Yeah.
That scene where he puts the entire face of this thing inside his pouch, that you can only see this portion of it. It is completely in there. And we know how sensitive Teal'c is in that area because his freaking symbiote, his life-sustaining thing, is in there. There is the imagery in that is really intense. And Obi's performance was amazing as well. Where there's kind of like a Darth Vader Emperor moment there where he plugs it into the back of his head and the actor turns around to say, who is doing this to me? And he can't even take 10 seconds. He's dead. Great episode. I love
I do remember Obi. I remember having the thought that his emblem would have been burned away, and then giving some backstory about that, so he would have. There was an attempt made that he tried to get away from.
His father did it to him. His father listened to Teal'c and said, "Son, we're free now," and he was caught up by another Goa'uld in the process and lost his dad and holds it against Teal'c. It's a great story arc, where he has to discover what his father discovered in Teal'c's opposition. Good episode. I love the stuff aboard the cargo ship. You've got an arm holding the bomb, the mine, and
because it's supposedly levitated. But you're talking about behind the scenes, we did have something holding the entirety of the bomb up, the weight of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then underneath it, I'm guessing that was shot like second unit with the changing of the colors and of everything else when they were switching changing the combination at the end with the.
I want to say probably. It's happened so long ago I don't remember.
That's fair.
I do remember a lot of the times we didn't want to waste. While we had Richard Dean Anderson on the set, we wouldn't want to waste a lot of time with inserts. So that might have been something that we delayed and then did later as an insert unit or a second unit, which happened often. We would try to make the most of his time and then shoot the inserts later.
I'm not sure if it was you who told me or someone else who told me that they would actually bring an ADR trailer to Bridge so that
I did not tell you that, but I was aware of that as well. So that was a way to maximize his time. Is that he would step off the set and then go into the truck and do his ADR, where everyone else had to go to the studio.
I'm curious if you remember if this was you or someone else who added this to the script. Inventing technology with this level of sophistication would require a zero. I thought that was such a great observation, a cool idea. The Phoenician system didn't have zeros; they had 1 through 9.
So that's definitely sounds like something Brad would come up with.
Okay.
Because I wish I had come up with that, but I did not. I came up with the super simple. Terok is the terrifying torturer. No.
Absolutely.
He came up with the zeros. Yeah, that definitely sounds like something Brad would come up with. And then the thing that was interesting for me was that the cargo ship / scout ship, we use those interchangeably. The bottom of that ship was just the studio floor, just painted. And I always found that amusing because if you were imagining a spaceship in outer space, you think of it having it's fully contained, but here we are with this structure that is just on the floor, and they just painted the pattern into the floor. And I always felt like, oh, we've really got to make it feel like this thing is inside of here, and it's going back and forth and getting close to the wall. And I mean, that was a fun part where it started to get close to the wall, and they were like, oh no, we got to move over.
Right, exactly, Jacob.
Which also Now that I think of it, that also is very close to what they had in Galaxy Quest when they were first pulling out of the hangar and they were going like this because they were trying to coax the ship over because he was scraping the
Start
side.
scraping the side of the base.
Yeah,
That's
which is a
great.
wonderful, wonderful moment in
Oh,
that movie.
just it's the best Star Trek movie ever made. Even
It
better than the Star
sure
Trek
is.
movie. I forget who said it. Will Wheaton or someone said that.
Yeah,
The James Robbins was talking about. I was trying to figure out why was the ring transporter sometimes a stencil on the floor and
yeah,
sometimes a raised device. And he said if we had to access it, it was raised, and if we didn't, it was a stencil, and that was all there was to it. It's like,
yeah.
oh, that makes sense.
Sounds pretty
Okay.
simple. Yeah, and it also was inconvenient to have it.
Yeah.
If it was a 3D version of it, was inconvenient because you wanted to be able to move around and move your dollies across the floor and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
and the effect of dropping it in and splitting it up and then coming the rings up was so much better than, taking, you would have to remove the one that was on the floor and replace it with the visual effect if you were going to have it done
Yeah.
that way. So just a little
Well,
sleight
oh
of
my God,
hand.
you just made me think of something. The you remember at the end of Tangent where they opened the canopy and they went out so that they could be ringed up
What am I,
into the
Scotty?
car. Well, do you remember? I think there was a huge amount of backlash because everyone had seen
Is it
not
Event
was it
Horizon?
Mission to Mars. Well, it's Tim Robbins takes his helmet off and his head freeze dried
Yeah,
and Brad was like, that is not what would happen,
yeah.
right? And didn't he say breathe out because
Yeah,
it was
you
a
want to
vacuum?
completely exhale so that you have no air inside of you. And as
That's
long as
right.
you're out there for a few moments, you should be okay.
So
But still there, yeah,
Brad correctly, asked all the right people,
yeah,
and he was absolutely sure that this was a viable solution
yeah.
to the problem, and it wasn't going to be like. Do you remember the mission to Mars?
I haven't seen it, but yeah.
I think Tim Robbins takes his helmet off and his head just goes, whoosh, and it looks like
Yeah, it's not going
it's
to happen
freeze
that
dried
way.
coffee.
Yeah,
And Brad was like, no, no,
yeah.
and everyone was like, are you sure? And Brad was like,
Right.
yeah, I'm sure. So that was the solution to their dilemma, right? And I was like, okay, let's do it.
It's like, how would you know, Brad? I had a real quick 15-second story. I had a roommate named Stephanie who was like 20 years older than me, and we were watching Apollo 13 for the first time. And she said, why are they weightless? I said, because they're in space. She's like, why? I said, Stephanie, you don't know that there's no weight in space? She said, she always called me Reed. She said, I don't know, Reed. I've never been.
I've never been.
It's like, well, Brad, how would you know for sure?
Dude, those guys built the set in the Vomit Comet so they could get those
Ah,
shots.
that's exactly
That
right.
seems like a lot of trouble just to get some weightless shots,
That's
but
it.
a lot of fun. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've got some fan questions. Do you have a little bit of time for that?
Heck yeah.
Okay. For the show,
Wait,
when
wait, wait. Sorry. You told me at one point you were gonna ask me some questions about Menace, and I think
I abs-
I need to
absolutely.
address
If you got
something.
time to discuss
Yeah.
Menace, I would love to.
Well,
Um,
first of all, I want to say I've made a terrible error in telling you that I directed Menace. I did not direct Menace. When you asked me the last time about Menace, I thought because I had memories of being on that set and being around Danielle and Nicolette, I thought I had, for some reason, substituted for Martin on the day of September 11th. That was not the case. What was the case, and I'll tell you who figured this out for me, it was you who figured it out for me because I watched the episode with the Dial of the Gate episodes of Christina Cox and then I guess it was Martin Wood as well.
yeah, because there
And,
were two
and
episodes filming that day.
we were both at Norco Studios, and Norco was named for the bike company that used to create bicycles in that building, and
Oh,
later was used for Sanctuary, the series Sanctuary. So we
right.
were two adjacent sets filming, and because Danielle Nicolette was a co-cast mate, I had a connection to her through my brother David because they were both on the series Third Rock from the Sun.
That's
So my memory was I went over there and I saw her laying on the plinth, the cement thing,
hmm
uh, and I said hello, and we had exchanged some niceties. And because I had a memory of being on the set and seeing her in her George Jetson outfit, I
That's
went,
true.
"Oh, I was there." And then I couldn't remember why I was there. And all I could come up with was I must have substitute directed. And because when you asked me, you went, "Well, you didn't direct that. You that was Martin Wood directed." And I was like,
Yeah,
"I don't know why I was on that set then."
exactly.
And then I saw you talking to Christina Cox, and
Yep.
I went, "Oh, I was shooting Sentinel right next door, and we had Frank Cassini and Christina Cox
Yeah.
because we were shooting like they were supposed to be the Dirty Dozen guys, but we couldn't afford
Mayborn's, yeah.
a dozen people, so we just had two. So it was the Dirty Duo, yeah,
And Christian
and
Boucher and Claire Tobias, the actress who played her, I'm guessing weren't available, so they completely recast that team. And I think
yes,
it's the one and only time you backsold the
yes,
previously on by
right.
creating new material for the
We had
previously
a
on.
cutaway of them
Brilliant.
also being direct. Yeah, yeah. I don't think I came up with that, but I'm sure Brad or Robert came up with that as a viable solution to you don't remember this.
That's exactly
These are
right.
the yeah.
These aren't the droids you're
Um,
looking for. So I've asked you about
exactly.
9/11. I've asked you about that.
You asked me about Menace and 9/11,
Okay.
and I had a
I
memory of
missed
it.
it.
And then you told you, and I said I directed that, and
Right.
you made a face and you looked it up and you went, Martin Wood directed it, and I was like, oh, why do I
Why do I have that
remember this?
memory?
It
Yeah.
was because I walked over and said, "Hey, Nicholas, it's good to see you. You remember me? I'm David's brother." Blah blah
Yeah.
blah. Oh, and that's why I had a memory of Nicolette and being there on it.
Yeah.
But I was actually on the other set with
That's
Christine.
right. Martin was so amazing about showing us. If you haven't seen Martin Wood Part 3, folks, go and check it out. He shows us the one shot that was shot
Yeah,
on 9/11
the
and the,
silhouette of them coming in. Yeah,
into where she's being stored, and the rest of it was shot later. And I was
yeah.
like, wow. It was very vivid for all of us that day. And so, you know,
That was not uncommon for two shows to be shooting at the same time,
really,
especially when we had limited access
yeah.
to Richard Dean Anderson
Even in season
sometimes.
5, okay.
Well, my recollection was if there was a scene owing, or we were going to move the unit all the way over to Norco
Yeah,
just to shoot one thing, so we would wait until the unit was there and then we would shoot it. Yeah,
makes a
so
lot of
all
sense.
different things like that. I think John Smith at one point said our show has become too big, so that two-handers, which is a slang for scenes with only two people in them, have become the domain of second unit. And I was like,
Mhm.
that's maybe the unit's too big if we can't shoot two-handers as a normal thing. Hmm.
It's it was an embarrassment of riches, that show.
Yeah,
17
it
seasons
was.
of a franchise. How many get that? It's wild.
No. Oh,
Lockwatch.
sorry. I want to
Yeah.
go on record as saying I'm sorry. I thought I directed Menace. I had a fleeting memory of something that happened a long time ago, and now I know because of your investigation that I was actually shooting Sentinel in the same studio, and so I was physically in the building as well when 9/11 was happening, and that's what I remember.
Understood. I appreciate the clarification always for historical accuracy as these go into the long-term archive. Um, Lockwatcher, for When Calls the Heart, there are so many Stargate actors in the series, including a lead with Kevin Smith, and Martin Wood directing 15 episodes. Is this fate? What was it like working on this series?
Are you asking me about One Calls the Heart?
Yep. Lockwatcher is, but yes.
Lockwatcher. First of all, what's with that name?
I don't know. I know his real name, but he doesn't use it.
Okay, Lockwatcher. How? So the question, if I understand, is how is it that Martin and myself both came to be directing When Calls the Heart? I
What
don't
was it
remember.
like working on this series and having so many Stargate veterans with you there? If I was to summarize what he was asking, there were
Oh,
so many Stargate actors in it, which was the case. Vancouver was very small, for not so much anymore. But what was your experience like working on When Calls the Heart?
well, except for Martin. how many? No, honestly, how many Stargate alumni were on When Calls the Heart?
There are many Stargate actors in the series. I mean,
I mean,
ChatGPT would give me an incorrect answer,
I
but I
worked
could
with
give you.
Pascal Hutton on
Yeah,
Sanctuary.
yeah, but she was in
On
Stargate
Sanctuary.
Atlantis.
Oh, but I hadn't worked with her on that.
Fair point.
I wasn't even aware of that
Yep.
she was on Stargate Atlantis.
Yeah.
Maybe
So
I should
there's
ask her about that. I was on When Calls the Heart because I had been shooting long form mysteries called Garage Sale Mysteries with Lori Loughlin, and she liked the way I directed, and
mhm.
she asked for them to hire me on that other show.
Ah, absolutely. No, great. Yeah, that's a great piece of knowledge to know.
Yeah.
Let's
So,
see here.
the short answer is I didn't know there was a bunch of people from
Yeah,
Stargate on When Calls the Heart, but I would just have to take your word for it. But they were, was it actors predominantly that he's talking about?
evidently that's what he was referring to. Lock
Oh, well,
Watcher, you're the
you completely figured it out. Yeah,
yeah,
the amount of the cream rises to the top, and
sure does.
if you work on 10 seasons or 65 episodes of the Stargate franchise, you're gonna end up with working with the same wonderful actors because they're in this town. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you know someone who can not only do the job but be good, really good at it, why not? Why I mean, why break something that fix something that isn't broken? Um,
Well, so lock watcher, lock
Lock
watcher.
Watcher. Mm-hmm.
So he's saying here's a lock and I'm watching it to see
Or
if it opens. Is it
like
what?
like a lock like in like
Or
that holds in water, to
that
make
kind
sure
of
that the
lock.
water doesn't go out. Yeah,
So he's retaining water.
perhaps, but it is spelled
Okay.
differently.
So
God, we're off
the other
topic.
thing is what happens is if you have a history with a bunch of wonderful actors and you
Yeah,
see a character description, you go, oh, I know somebody who would be great for this role, i.e. Stephen Williams as one of our generals. He'd be
yeah.
awesome. He played a captain on our show. And of course, John Smith knew Stephen Williams very well because John Smith was a producer on 21 Jump Street as well.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, just the dude is so cool. I would love to get him on. I'm gonna have to ask you to reach
Yeah.
out to him for me. JW, which did you enjoy more with SG1, writing or directing? Um, I would imagine they were very different kinds of things. Um,
Well, directing is very much a group activity because
mm-hmm,
you're in charge of a lot of people, and you're on the what we call the floor, which is
mm-hmm.
the studio floor, and you're taking words off of paper and you're fleshing it out, and there's it's very performance oriented. Whereas writing, as attractive as it is to make up things from whole cloth and to be around such talented writers as Joe and Paul and Rob and Brad, who gave me an enormous amount um,
Creative freedom.
well, I wasn't going to say creative freedom. I was going to say knowledge, right? Because
Oh,
they really were incredible mentors to me,
yeah.
and because I had at the time an encyclopedic knowledge of, I watched every single movie that came out, no matter how crappy it was, so I would throw out as many suggestions as I could in my longstanding understanding of the movies that I had seen and see whatever would stick to the wall. And sometimes they took my suggestion. I think Brad very early on recognized my enthusiasm,
Mhm.
um, and he took he was very gracious with his time with me because I had just come off of. I'm getting in the weeds here, but I would just quickly tell you that I think the way I transitioned from directing to being invited into the writing room was I had directed Demons, and I was enamored with the origin story of the Unas, and I came in, and I knew that race of beings had been referred to as the first ones in
Yeah,
Thor's hammer,
yeah.
and so I said I have an idea.
The
I want
first,
to
yeah,
pitch.
the first one. But yeah, it was only then in Demons that they were now a species. And so now you had freedom to create their tapestry.
Okay, okay. And
Yeah,
James Earl Jones was the voice of the original, right? Yeah, he was amazing. And
that's
they put
right.
all those wonderful animal noises underneath. And I said, I think an origin story would be kind of cool. That where you have the Unas and the thing. I was highly influenced by an Australian movie called Walkabout,
Okay.
which is a if you haven't seen it, it's amazing. It's quite old, but
Yeah.
I think it still holds up. It's just amazing. And I was so I pitched them. I said, "What if we go back to the planet and we see the Unas that are not taken over by the Goa'uld?" And I think he was intrigued, but more than just intrigued by my idea, he was in. I think he recognized my enthusiasm, and so he he mentored me, for lack of a better word, and he I learned so much from him, and I'm still so grateful that he let me in the room. But I don't think I never thought I was a better writer than I was a director. That is a skill that I'm quite proud of, and it all came from my love of acting and performing, right? And so I think a lot of really really outstanding directors have themselves been performers or have a performing background of some kind.
There's a lot that I have routinely received compliments about you on this show, where people come on and say, this guy, he acted and he really knows how to take care of his actors and to direct with their sensibilities. There's just something about. You don't have to be an actor to direct, obviously. You
No,
can
of course
read
not.
people,
No.
but there is something about someone who has been in those shoes and knows where they're coming from, that endears is not the right word, but there's a
There's an
I know where you're
empathy
coming.
that
Right.
comes. Well, I did it. I
Yeah.
did it before. So if I
Yeah.
was having to do this role, this was what I would be concerned of.
Yep.
So if you're an editor, and you have a relatively solo existence, and you apply your craft in a cubicle without barely any interaction except with an assistant editor, you're not going to immediately um, connect with whole hosts of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's 60 people that you have to tell what to do and get excited about, and be the mascot and say, let's do this. Let's push this giant boulder up this hill. Oh, come on, everybody, let's go this way. Yeah.
Absolutely. Susan McEwen, sugar glass is often used when you have to break glass. Have you ever had to use that as a director or come across it? There were a couple instances where it was definitely used in Atlantis with the ZPM and with the when Rodney drops one, and
Yeah.
the glass when it explodes in Weir's face in season 3. Um, have you ever had any experience with it as a director?
My one of my first credits as an adult was with Sugar Glass. I got shot in the chest, and I threw myself back into a glass door for the movie Happy. My dad was directing that, and then I got shot, and I even though it was Sugar Glass, I ended up cutting the side of my hand a little bit on the frame
So
because
it's not foolproof.
no, it's
Wow.
it's not exactly foolproof, but Sugar Glass actually tastes like sugar, and in fact, I'm intrigued by this person's curiosity about Sugar Glass
It's
itself.
it's a left field one. I like those.
Yeah.
It's like, okay,
Uh,
let's go over here because we've been talking about effects, so that's a good
well,
one. That's a good practical one.
Breaking Bad has this wonderful interview detail about Bryan Cranston and who plays the character
Aaron
Jesse.
Paul?
Yeah, it was an 18-hour day. They were tired. It was going on and on and on. And the methamphetamine was sugar. It was cotton candy flavored rock candy. They just started
Blue Sky.
throwing, yeah, cotton candy flavored rock candy, and they were just eating it. So rock candy, if you need to eat glass, right? If you or you could do sugar glass, which if you need it to break really easily. And then also there's once you have an actor fall on it, you want it to be rubber bits, right? So they use
Right.
the rubberized version of that. Otherwise, you get. I remember a scene.
Tell me.
Mel- Melissa Stubbs, Melissa Stubbs,
Name
a
rings a bell.
wonderful a stunt choreographer slash a stunt person who lives in town or got her start in town here. She was doing a stunt on 21 Jump Street, and she was in a barely there cocktail dress, and she got pushed through a plate glass window, and she went through the glass. And Mario Van Peebles was directing, and he came out. He had a low angle, and he did one day, and they pushed her through the glass, and I was like, "Holy cow!" And then she got up, and she had blood all over her
Wow.
bare skin where she had landed on top of it, and I was like, "Was this planned?" And she was like, you're gonna get cut a little bit." I was like, "Holy crap!" And she couldn't wear any pads because she was wearing a tiny little cocktail dress, right? Because it was supposed to be at a party, right? I was like, that lady's
She's
tough.
tough as nails.
Melissa Stubbs is
That's
tough,
like,
man.
and like Dan Payne, it's like, guys, how do we ever possibly know when you're really in trouble? Because everything is always a-okay. Like, you
Yeah.
just have to trust your stunt performers that when they're in serious jeopardy that they'll tell you, but they don't always necessarily know. You know, like Dan Payne was overheating in the Cull Warrior suit at one point, and I mean, he was just like passing out, and people were like, Dan, we got to get you out of that thing. You're
Yeah.
dying. Not right at
The,
this moment, but you know,
dude, the original performer in Demons
yep.
had to be replaced because he couldn't take the he was in an almost completely rubber suit that allowed him to not his skin not to breathe at all, and he didn't last. He was like, "It's too much. I can't take it."
No,
And
absolutely. Well, he called it
I
out.
think
Good.
the lesson was you have to have more open spots. You can't
Uh-huh.
just cover the entirety of the person.
Yeah, which is like when you guys went back to them in Beast of Burden, you know, when we finally saw them
Yeah,
again, there were much more
it was,
clothes involved,
yeah.
right?
And the most important, the zipper
Yep.
with the chain with the thing so you could put the giant claw through there. That was one of I made sure of that because I was like, Dion, dude, you gotta be able to pee. That's one of the things that I would have come up with because I have empathy for performers,
Yeah, the
right?
first runs, I missed that one. Yeah, that came in previously. And Alex Zahara
Now
always talked about, you know, the Unas and being the female Unas and everything else, and just having that flexibility as an
that
actor.
that information, sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt your question. The
Don't keep
reason I
going.
knew the reason I knew that peeing was optional or not optional was because my good friend Dustin Nguyen and I drove to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles set, and we were visiting some friends of his. And I was told by one of the turtle performers, we don't pee, we don't poop, and we don't pee, and we have to take very little fluids. And
For
I
the
said,
90s ones?
the ones, the way back ones, yeah.
Yeah, the
And I said, why?
OCs. Oh,
And
geez.
they said, because from here down, I'm all turtle. And when I do a high kick, there can be no seams, there can be no zippers. It's all turtle down there. Oh my God, that's
So
terrible.
diapers?
Maybe,
What,
maybe a
a
diaper.
cord that runs to the floor, and when they hook you
No,
up to the thing, they just suck it out of you?
he just
Man,
said they just sucked it up for that. And I went, that seems inhuman.
just don't
Even
drink the night
astronauts
before.
and pilots have
Right.
something to pee in. Yeah.
Right, and still they're sweating. And Dustin Nguyen, who played Mr. Chan in a couple of the last episodes of season one of Sequest before you joined, I loved his performance in that. Cool guy.
Yeah,
So,
he is the coolest. So because I had that inside information,
yeah,
I knew that we needed to make arrangements because it was just Dion
yeah,
for most of the screen time.
yeah.
It was just Dion. We had to make an arrangement for him to be able to pee.
Yeah, and his physicality is just extraordinary. There is no one else that could have pulled that off. Patrick Curry does a great job in
Yeah.
season seven, and he's kind of
Well, he was
domesticated at that point. So it's a little bit.
exactly.
He's standing up right now, so
Yeah.
I buy it. I really wish it was a different character, though, to be perfectly honest with you, because Dion's
But as you
physicality was
say,
so specific.
he absolutely was specific, and we talked about that quite a lot.
Yeah,
We had a really nice sit down ahead of time, and I told him what all the words mean. I told him what the culture was, and
Yeah.
that I told him about Walkabout and how
Yeah.
and why he was out there. He was transitioning to an adult, and he was doing this. Walkabout is when an Aboriginal goes and fends for themselves to prove that they are a viable member of the tribe, so that they when they come back and they said, "I survived all by myself."
See what they're
I
made of.
yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Last question for you. My name, their name is my name. How normal was it to film 2 episodes simultaneously? Because I remember the board that you guys had in the office and all of the sticky notes so you could move stuff around. And there
Yeah.
was some crossover because every episode had like 6, I think, days, 6 or 7 production days. And there was some crisscross, but I don't remember a lot other than for
Well,
SG1 in
so
Atlantis.
when I first came on the show, there was a 7.5 day schedule,
7.5.
and there was a handoff midday.
Got it.
So often what would happen would be that because Martin and myself rotated quite a lot, I would often take a handoff from him,
Hmm.
and vice versa.
Hmm.
And uh, so on the seventh day, it would say 7.5 like in the schedule. So it was like day one of 7.5, day two of 7.5. And on the last day, it would say, I guess it would say point. So on the last day, on one call sheet, it would say,
Like point
uh,
oh.
or zero point 0.5 of 7.5,
Interesting.
or
Okay.
7.5 of 7.5, and then it would be zero point 0.5 of 7.5. It was
Ah,
that,
point 0.5. Okay.
that's yeah. So
Yeah.
imagine the schedule lining up to that. And just on that last day, there would be a handoff, and supposedly it happened at lunch, but it was not uncommon for Martin to say, I need the crew for maybe an extra hour or two. So I'm sorry, we didn't get all the shots. Okay.
Okay. So,
So,
so in a circumstance where like you had the Sentinel running at Norco and you also had Menace running at Norco,
sorry, that was a different situation.
because those
I
were,
was telling you about how it first started, but
I
then
see.
what then happened was part of playing the game as it was me trying to figure out how I could get some extra time to shoot some extra shots or some battle sequences that I felt that I needed to really fill out the sequence. And I would often go to John Smith and say, I if you can I trade one day of main unit for 2 days of second unit on the in the battle sequence. So we'd go out to the sand dunes, right, the Richmond sand dunes, and I would
Mhm.
get a whole bunch of Jaffa background, and I could shoot the other side of the battle, unmolested by the supervising by the mucky mucks, you know, and and
The John
so
Lennox of
so
the world.
no, actually, John Lennox was really cool. It was Michael Greenberg making sure that everything was
Okay.
in support of Richard Dean Anderson,
I see.
as
Yeah.
was his
Yeah.
job.
That was
So
his job. Yeah.
yeah, so we would never shoot a second unit sequence with actual Richard Dean Anderson. He'd be on main
Sure.
unit, right?
Absolutely.
But then I would have free reign to do whatever I wanted on this,
Got it.
which made sense to me, and it was a win-win for everybody. And then so what does that do? If you do 6 days instead of 7 days of main unit, the entirety of the season goes down by one day, right?
Mhm.
So ultimately, what would happen was that all the rentals and all the hard costs of the 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 lights, the pre-planned lights that were in the studio and all that stuff, those things that eventually had to come down, there was less a day, right? And you wrap everyone out one day earlier, right? So if you did that enough, you could claw back a handful of days over the course of a 20 episode season, right?
Yeah.
So that made sense to John Smith. So that was a reason why two shows would be shooting at the same time, sometimes not in the same exact spot. Okay.
Yeah.
So then in the case of 9/11, we were shooting at Norco Studios, formerly the bike factory Norco.
Mhm.
And I don't maybe a lot of Americans who watch the show aren't familiar with Norco, but if I had said Schwinn, that would make sense. But Norco was a very viable a Canadian bicycle company, right? and it shot in this giant oversized building that made sense to assemble bicycles and then ultimately made sense as a soundstage, a conversion to a soundstage. So when we were shooting that, because Menace was first and Sentinel was afterward
Yeah.
in the lineup, that would have been the last day of Menace and the first probably shooting day of Sentinel. I'm just guessing that's how it worked.
Probably right. Yeah.
And so either Martin was shooting second unit being the last day of his show, or I was shooting second unit as the first day of my show. But and the reason would have been because we were now the unit had moved to Norco, which was our miscellaneous sets, all the other sets that we didn't have access to. And then,
Most of the Gould stuff was over there. Yeah.
well, a lot of spaceships,
The spaceship was there. The Earth ship
the
was there
scout
for a
ship was
while.
over there,
Yeah.
um, and then
The
anytime we
temples.
needed a lot of floor space,
Hmm.
the window of opportunity, Calliope was there, right?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. You look at the ebb and flow of a season, spend a lot of money at the beginning, then some more bottle episodes, then a lot of money at the middle, more bottle episodes, a lot of money at the end. As you approach the end of a season, did you ever get the feeling from above of, okay, we need to tighten our belt a little bit more? Or was it all pretty well evened out so that you didn't really get, depending on the time of the year, more of a pushback at all? Or was it just normal that near the end of a typical season, you wouldn't have access to as much, time and resources as you would have liked, and we're nearing the end of our season, and this is just normal?
It was quite common for the producers to request that we be frugal, and which is a difficult situation to be put in because you want to do whatever you can
Yeah.
to help the cause.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I often would shoot um, as frugally as possible. One of the techniques I used was very early on. I would print more than one take, which was something that I learned as a child watching my dad and Burt Reynolds shooting Smokey and the Bandit and Cannonball
Right.
Run. They would just leave it. Often they would leave it running, and that's why we had the bloopers, is because they would just leave it running and wait
Ah.
until they got the line right. And so normally, if somebody messes up, they cut and they would start again. And one of the other things they would do is they would just pretty much print Hal Needham, who was the director of those wonderful, joyful moments. I think he would just print everything. And so the lesson that I was learning was uh, you don't need one perfect take because you're going to cut this together anyway.
Right.
Uh, yeah, so I don't not need to do 7 takes until they get the one take correctly on the seventh take, and then I'll only print take 7. They did it mostly right in take 1, and then the lines that they messed up in take 1, they got right in the take 2, and between that and all the other coverage that we're shooting, that's fine. So I'll shoot. I'll complete. And if the actor asks, well, I'm used to getting 7 takes. I'd like another take. Okay, well, 3 takes. So we'll print all 3 takes and move on. And I get a tap on the shoulder. This is me. This is me explaining how I was being frugal. Ultimately, I got a tap on the shoulder from John Smith. He said, "You're printing too much material." Because in the printed material column, there was a number that was much bigger than usual, right? Usually you only print 1 take. And I said, well, you remember yesterday when you complimented me on getting that boardroom scene? There was 7 characters there, and if you do the math very quickly in your head, and if you do a master 1
Yep.
take plus 7 takes to
Close-ups.
get it right on all the other characters, that's 50 shots to get eight good angles, right? And I said, I did. You complimented me on getting us out early on a boardroom scene, which you had also confided in me that you had not been able to achieve in a normal way prior to this. And I said, so I think if you go back and you crunch the numbers and you see
Hmm.
that printing 2 takes or 3 takes is not worse than having 60 people on the clock in overtime. And I saw his eyes light, and they went back. And I think between him and John Lennox, they went, "This does make sense. Okay, let's do that." And then naturally, when we went digital,
Mm-hmm.
of course, you're just going to print it all. It's just memory space at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't printed film. So that became the standard. But I wasn't doing it for that reason. I was like, it's just better. It's just like this is the first couple times they did it.
They're fresh still.
They're fresh. It's good.
Yeah.
I mean, you can easily burn out an actor by asking them to do, a three-page performance 7 times,
Yeah.
times the 7 other actors that are in the scene. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. Peter, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you taking so much time with us. I love the stuff with the technical conversation. We started off with 30 people, we ended with 80. So I think
80.
they appreciated it
80
as well.
people.
Live watching, yeah. So it means a lot to me that you went through and were so thoughtful and detailed about the process that you go through to compose one of our favorite shows. So franchises, and it always means
Yeah.
the world to me to have you back.
Well, I'm thrilled to be asked back. I like when people are interested in what I have to say, and of course, I love the sound of my own voice. So if you want to do this again, I'd be happy to come back.
I'd love to have you back before the end. We usually wrap in October or November. I'll ask you back. So,
Okay,
but please give Rowdy big hugs for me.
will do.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the show on this side, sir.
Sounds good.
Thank you, sir.
Cheers.
Peter DeLuise, everyone, writer, producer, director, Stargate. My name is David Reed. You're watching Dial the Gate, the Stargate Oral History Project. Thanks so much to my team for making this episode possible. Thank you to Anthony, to Raj, to Jeremy, Kevin, Lockwatcher, Marcia, and Jacob. You guys make this show possible week after week. And if you enjoy the episode, click that like button. It really does make a difference with the show and will help us grow our audience. Kira Clavel, who played Amaterasu, I love saying that name, in SG1, is joining us. Let me see here. She is joining us tomorrow. I haven't actually updated the website yet. My bad. She's joining us tomorrow at 3 p.m. to discuss her appearance on the show. And then Tomo Pennicott, who played third in SG1 in A Natural Selection in Season 6. He is joining us, I believe, on Monday, and I still have to update the website for that as well. He's joining us on Tuesday, the 15th at 11 a.m. Pacific time to discuss his new show, Carrie, that's coming out. Maybe we'll talk about a little bit more Stargate and Battlestar Galactica. So I appreciate you all tuning in. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate, and I will see you on the other side.